Baby, let's cruise away from here. Don't be confused. The way is clear. And if you want it, you got it forever. This is not a one-night stand. Listen, let the music take your mind. Just release and you will find you're gonna fly away. Plans to go my way. I love it when we're cruising together. Music is playing for love. Cruising is made for love. I love it when we're cruising together. Baby, tonight belongs to us. Everything's right. Do what you must. And inch by inch we get closer, closer to every little part of each other. Ooh, yes. Let the music take your mind. Just release it, you will find. All right, it looks like we're live. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad everybody's here. I'm going to start off by just a little housekeeping. You are welcome to drop comments into the chat. I understand quite a few people registered, so I want to make sure that you are able to ask questions as we go along today. I'll introduce myself. My name is Tammy Garnes. I'm the Director of Education and Understanding for Ava DuVernay's media collective, Array. And at Array, we pride ourselves in creating content like we're going to talk about today that is steeped in social justice and that really mirrors the world that we live in. Array is a multi-arts platform and a social impact collective. Ava DuVernay founded, award-winning filmmaker Ava DuVernay founded this company almost 10 years ago. We're getting ready to celebrate our 10th anniversary. And so what we've done with Array 101, which was launched earlier this year, is that we launched an online education initiative that where we deliver social impact learning companions and that are based on the different films and television shows that Array has either produced or released. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we have some special guests with us today. We, from the Ron Clark Academy, two of our teachers, Michael Bonner is here and Pam Haskins is here. So you have educators in the room with you. So you have great people to ask questions of. What we've been doing at Array with our learning companions, some of you've had a chance to go and look at them before today. And the first one we released happened earlier this year in May, and that was for the mini-series When They See Us. When They See Us is a really powerful mini-series, award-winning, that just really dug deep into, it was perfect for the time that we were living in 2020. This spring, summer, when it came out, was one of those things that started popping up on all of the lists of things that you should read and things that you should use if you want to have sensitive conversations about race and equity and justice in America. And we're very proud of that. But what we really were excited to see is how many educators were actually trying to infuse the lessons into their classrooms and into their lesson plans, especially when so many of you knew that you were going to have to come back and teach online in the fall. So with that in mind, when we released Selma 101, the learning companion for the Academy Award nominated film Selma, we wanted to make sure that we were giving you information that you could use also as you went into the voting season this year. And since the voting season has taken a long time this go around, we wanted to make sure that we know that it's going to last. And plus, voting is not a seasonal thing. This is something that we should be teaching: civics education, history. These are things that we should be teaching all the time in our classrooms. And so we wanted to make sure it was relevant content that was easy to use. Very proud we had students contribute to this, 2 college students that were dynamic in helping us write these lessons. Pretty much every good movement starts with students. And so we wanted to make sure we had student voice in this. We also wanted to have educator voice. So we partnered on our Selma Learning Guide. We partnered with Harvard and the Ron Clark Academy. And with our first learning guide for When They See Us, we partnered with XQ, which so many of you are also familiar with. They are a heavyweight in the education space. So with all of that said about what we're doing over here at Array with the learning guides, I wanted to pivot into why Pam and Michael have joined us today. These 2 educators were 2 of the 5 educators that helped us to actually write the Selma 101 learning companion. And when I tell you that they understand how to teach in a culturally responsible way, it's almost an understatement. I mean, the 2 of them have really mastered the art of storytelling in their classrooms, making sure that it is equitable, accessible, relevant, and culturally responsive. So I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we'll start to have a conversation. Okay, so we'll start with you ladies first. Pam Haskins.
Good evening, good afternoon. I'm Pam Haskins. I teach 7th and 8th grade at the Ron Clark Academy. However, my experience has been 6th through 12th grade, and I've taught in public schools, private schools, and I really draw from my experiences in a variety of educational settings. I take a very aggressive approach to literature, making sure that I infuse the humanities, because literature without history is flat. It's nothing. So I want to make sure that my students can step inside of a story and actually understand the context from which the author intended. A unique thing about the Ron Clark Academy is that, different from the other spaces that I've taught in, we would actually get on an airplane and travel to some of the places that I've taught about. So I just wanted to just say thank you for the opportunity to be here to share some of the experiences that I've had in education, especially around this topic of culturally relevant teaching, because it is so important to arm our students with as much information, with as many facts as we possibly can.
All right, thank you, Pam. And so, Michael, give us a little background on you. And I know you're newer to the Ron Clark Academy than your colleague Pam is. Tell us where you've been and where you are.
Yeah, she's the best mentor in the world. My name is Michael Bonner, and I am a 4th grade social studies teacher and a 6th grade reading teacher at the Ron Clark Academy. I have been teaching for 8 years, and previously, before teaching at the Ron Clark Academy, I was teaching at a public school in Greenville, North Carolina called South Greenville Elementary, a very marginalized area. The school was surrounded by barbed wire, and it was there, just like Ms. Haskins was saying, that you notice different types of inequities and different types of correlations that aren't necessarily positive for our students' academic success. And that is where the passion comes from, and the understanding that we can really arm our students with the truth and allow them to be able to analyze different situations and look for facts, then we're truly preparing our world for a better place.
Fantastic. So one of the things we talked backstage a little bit about was the fact that buzzwords, right? Anyone who's ever worked in education, like all of us have it, not me the way you have, but okay, you really are in the classroom. I'm usually on the outside in some office safe, but you're doing the heavy lifting, like all these teachers that are on here today. Anyone who's worked in education knows that we hear buzzwords. Every year, there seems to be something new that people are throwing at us that we need to communicate. A new way of learning, a new way of teaching, a new way of explaining something. So when it comes to words like equity and inclusion, when it comes to social responsibility, social justice, or in this case, the title of this particular session, culturally responsive classrooms. Can you guys kind of break down for us what those terms mean? Because I know there are other educators that are in this today who are thinking, like, are these all the same? Do they all mean the same thing? How do I even wrap my arms around the vocabulary before I can even begin to teach in a way that I'm supposed to be teaching for all students? So jump right in. What do all these buzzwords mean, and how can we understand them?
Michael, do you want to start?
Hey, of course, I'll try to start off for you and I'll let you bring it home. So honestly, as an educator, there are new acronyms every year. God, Jesus, have every day, every second, right? So I understand being in the whirlwind of the different types of terminology. To me, culturally responsive teaching is essentially making sure that you're including as many cultures as you possibly can into your classroom so that students can feel safe in the environment, open and safe enough to be able to engage truly with the content and not just memorize the information for the sake of a standardized assessment, right? And I think as a teacher, the more that I begin to understand that, and understand that if I could find a way to present a pedagogy or teach a lesson where students can feel represented and also see how other people are being represented throughout society and throughout media, that will create a closer community in my classroom. And ultimately, that will make them better citizens as they grow up and be able to vote one day because they have awareness of everything that's going on around them. Haskins, I'll pass it to you.
Hey, look, you already knocked that one out of the park, sir. I wanted to bring in a couple of elements to all of these acronyms, and CRT seems to be the three letters that we keep hearing all the time. I'm hearing culturally responsive teaching, culturally relevant teaching, and then a third one, critical race theory. So CRT can go in so many different directions that it's really important to make sure that you differentiate between the three. However, there are some common threads that go throughout all of them, and one of them is voice and facilitation, teacher as a facilitator. Now, when you're a teacher that does not look like the students that you are leading, you have to recognize that, number one. First of all, they see it, you see it, so we can't miss the elephant in the room, which a lot of the reasons why a lot of the critical race theory, the CRTs are coming about is because the facilitation has not included all voices. It has not allowed everyone's story to be heard. So voice and facilitation are central to all of them, even though each of those things are slightly different.
Okay, so with that being said, your students, you guys have taught in all kinds of schools, all kinds of grades. I mean, you span now elementary school, the two of you, to high school, with all types of students from all types of backgrounds. How are you making sure? I'd love for people to hear about, I've seen you both on fire in the classroom. I know what it looks like, but everyone here hasn't. So just kind of walk us through what it looks like for you to put together your lessons, your lesson plans. People who are familiar with the school know that you guys are very innovative. You're dynamic. You're always on your feet. You're always bringing in the arts to help infuse that into your lessons. But everyone doesn't have all of that, nor does everyone have all of that energy to give every time, especially when we're teaching in this type of platform. So just help me to understand a little bit, what's your thought process? How do you walk through planning your lessons, and how do you make sure they are culturally relevant and sensitive?
Well, for me, I always bring wherever I am in any educational situation or environment, I always bring passion and energy, music, I introduce myself to my students as having a very dry sense of humor. So then they're always trying to look to not laugh at my dry jokes, but they end up laughing at my dry jokes. So I always try to make sure that I can connect with each individual child, because eventually I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off of what everybody has kind of avoided talking about, because those conversations are uncomfortable. However, they're necessary. I'll take an example. In one of my earliest teaching situations, I was at a very affluent private school, and the majority of my students they didn't look like me, but I still had to teach the curriculum. And in that curriculum was the piece of literature, To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, how in the world am I going to teach To Kill a Mockingbird, and I'm in the position of the character who doesn't necessarily win in that situation? So we had to be real for a second, not for a second, for a long while. We had to step into a piece of literature and history and current events at the same time. So I had to set up a dialogue with them and relate to those individual students as people first, so they would trust me in the moments when that literature got hard to deal with. I wanted them to be able to trust me, to not walk into the room mad, but at the same time, there are some contentious conversations that we need to have. And at the end of it, I'm not walking out of the room mad at them, and I don't want them mad at me. Right. So that was a very sensitive time in my life, because I had to figure out, how do I do this? Because I was very young. I was a new teacher. I was maybe 3 or 4 years older than the kids that I was teaching.
There.
Yeah, right? It was tough. So once I got that out and I left that school and I went into an environment where the kids looked like me, we were rocking and rolling. But what I had to tell them was this: you're going to have to go back into the world where in Walmart, in Target, not everybody is going to look like you, and you're going to remember those conversations. But you can't hold on to that. You just have to know when and where you enter into those spaces. Recognize, yes, there are some biases that folks have, but does that apply to you? Do you make it apply to you by the way that you react? Or do you take your home training? Do you take your literature training? Do you take the training that you have you've amassed over these years and have intelligent conversations? Difficult though they may be, you still have to have that conversation. You still have to be in that space. You still have to know how to conduct yourself. So when I teach at RCA, there are students who don't look like me in my classroom even right now. And I have that same conversation with them. Listen, some of this may be uncomfortable for you to hear. Some of it may feel like, for black folks, for, kind of having, how black people say, don't be talking about my business outside.
Right.
Don't reveal the stuff that goes on. Sometimes it feels like you're revealing some things that may not be comfortable. And now we got to deal with that in that uncomfortable space. Sometimes I have to close my door and say, look, and just have that real mama conversation with them. Because if you don't have it and they leave you, you can't assume somebody else is going to pick it up. So I take the opportunity as many times as I possibly can to uncover those things in a loving, safe environment that I've made sure that they can trust me to be vulnerable.
Well, first of all, I caught the home training line. Let's just say that. That flipped right on in. I love that, because, what happens at home definitely shows up at school. And we all know that sometimes you are competing with lessons that have been learned outside of the schoolhouse, and you're having to retrain students to hear you and to understand what the messages you're trying to deliver to them. We have someone who doesn't have any problems most of the time getting people to listen to her, that's going to join us right now. We have a little bit of a surprise. If our friends at Google can bring on our special guest. I'd like to bring on Ava DuVernay, our founder of Array. Ava, thank you for joining us. We were just talking about how Pam was just talking about how sometimes oftentimes she has to have difficult conversations with her students so that they're prepared to go out into the world. You are someone who has allowed all of us to watch difficult conversations take place on screen and then take it back into our own lives. And we're just so happy to have you here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Sorry for my appearance and my location. I'm on a scout. But Tammy, who's our incredible director of education and understanding at Array, and who has really been the brainchild behind the execution of Array 101, which has been a long-held dream of mine. She figured out how to do it. The Ron Clark Academy part of it is just a mind blower to me. So I just bow to you. I am amazed by what you've done. I mean, I'm overwhelmed by how precise, how fascinating. And, you know, I'm a director, so the production value, I mean, everything. I was just like, come on, y'all. Come on, somebody. So I know that Array 101 is filling a void that I have long looked for and not seen. A catalytic, dynamic, y'all are teachers, so you tell me if a catalytic is a real word, but if not, I'm making it up.
You got it.
A piece that catalyzes, that instigates, that triggers the desire to connect what we see on screen with learning more, right? Not just a study guide that's a regurgitation of what you saw, because I saw it, right? I want to go further. And that's what I always wanted our work to be. And so our study companions, for people who want to learn, whether they're a student or whether they're, you know, anyone who's seen the film and wants to go deeper, that was the dream. And so Tammy, working with Ron Clark Academy, with Harvard, with all of the folks that we've been working with to put these guides together, it's been a dream come true. So I just want to thank you. I don't know who's out there watching, but if you're seeing this and you need a little oomph, you need a little something, you need a tool to connect to, I just urge you to download these Array 101s completely free to you. We're making no money off of it. There's no exchange of commerce here. It's just an exchange of ideas and love and knowledge. And I don't know what's better than that. So I had to pull over on the side of the road to say that. Appreciate you. Look forward to meeting you, Pam and Michael, in person one day.
Yes.
I'll even wear my mask. I promise. I believe in them. And I just appreciate you both and everyone watching. Have a good afternoon.
Thank
Tammy.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So yeah, yay. This has been a yeah, that was beautiful. This has been a dream of hers, just like she said. And you know, Ava's not just an artist, she's a big thinker and she's a deep thinker. And so just, you know, as we're creating these learning companions, we just want to make sure we're honoring not only the vision that she had for them, but we're also honoring our educators and our parents and anyone else, because they're for all ages. So anyone else who's using them. And then when you're writing about material about people, when you're putting together lessons and learning companions, as you guys both know, about people's lives, you want to make sure you're honoring them too. And then when you step back in time, like we did all with Selma, you got to honor the ancestors, right? So like you got a lot of people you got to make proud. So I'm very happy that she's happy. And you guys definitely put your foot into these lessons that you did. So Michael, I want to talk about that. One of your lessons that you wrote, the lesson that you focused on was about protest and protest movements. Right. One of the things I love about this is that in the Selma 101 guide, we actually get into the mechanics of a protest. We give students and adults tools that they can use. In the Selma Learning Guide, just for our teachers out there, it really is for maybe middle school through adult learners. You can scale it up or down. And if you needed to pull out pieces for your elementary learners, high elementary learners, you could, about voting rights. But in that Selma 101 Learning Companion, we talk about how you can plan a protest. Well, first of all, what is a protest? How do you set goals when you want to protest something? Nothing worse than saying, I'm gonna go out in the street with a sign to protest something and I have no clue about what it is that I want in the end, right? You need a goal. We talk about, hey, students, you need a goal. We talk about how do you measure the success of your protest? And then we also talk about the different ways that you can protest. A protest is not always a march. It's not always, it can be artistic. It can be a song. It can be a moment. It can be a sit-in. It can be a tweet sent online. It can be a lot of things. So let's talk a little bit about how you approached your protest lesson and what you wanted people to take away from it.
All right. So first, that was a really cool surprise to see her here. I was not expecting that at all. And I definitely want to give a shout out to David, Tully, and Cam, who are the artists and the geniuses behind the video. Yes, they are.
Those videos are incredible. Y'all got to watch this video. That's what Ava was referring to too. Those videos are top notch. Like, yes. Did y'all rent a studio? What was going on? But I know RCA, y'all young, scrappy, and happy. So y'all over there figuring out how to put a sheet on a wall sometimes. So I know it can be done by any teacher as well.
Yes. I did want to. I was about to say, Michael, I did want to just double down on thanking our production team. We wrote the lessons, but they brought it to life. And that behind the scenes kind of thing, not sleeping, thank you, David, Tully, Cam. Thank you so much.
Yes. And Jay was a part of that. So for me, I'm trying to figure out, not even trying to figure out, I've been in this place recently within this year as I entered into the 8th year of my educational career, is how can I make sure that I'm reaching individuals who may think like Ava, who are those that are deep thinkers, that are analytical, that can analyze and understand and critique and construct different types of arguments in order to represent what they want to talk about. So with the anatomy of the protest, what I wanted to do was allow students and even adults, for people to understand that you have a voice. And if I can do that at the foundational level inside of my classroom, then ultimately that argument of my vote doesn't really count will start to go away, because they will recognize that your vote does count, because that's one way to demonstrate your voice inside of American side of politics. So within my lesson, I just highlighted to different people to different individuals that they watched the lesson to students, that with any situation, whether it's civil rights, whether you're dealing with the situations and things that are going at the border, whether it's the LGBTQAI plus community, that when you see something wrong, and you see a certain group of people or individuals being harmed, their humanity is being stripped from them, how can you use your voice to stand up for that? And for some people, like you said, Tammy, they may believe you need to go into the street with a sign, and that's not always the case, right? So I wanted them to understand that you have a voice, and one voice is right here, your cell phone. And for our students, because they're already up there, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, I was letting them know that, hey, you can design, whether your own clothing brand, you can design a social media page, you can design a written piece, a short film, you can design a business to sort of help support the injustice and things that you see. So I was trying to figure out this unique way of marrying technology along with understanding and having a voice, with the First Amendment, and also bringing in the piece of being an entrepreneur and building your own platform so that you can make sure that your voice is being heard. And I think that we have success with that. My current 6th graders right now, they're building their own podcast to discuss what we learn in reading and what they're also doing inside of current events. So I think as teachers, if we really want them to take hold of what's really going on, we have to get them to understand that there are ways that they can use their voice right now, because they're already using their voice right now. They already see everything that's going on around them, whether it's on the news, whether it's on their phones, whether it's through conversation. So as educators, how can we move from a place of teaching them to conform to society, and then instead of, how can we move from teaching to conform to teaching them to understand how to be free in their thoughts and free to make a change inside of the world?
I'm not sure if a lot of adults even understand, Michael, that they have that kind of freedom. You know what I'm saying? You get a little complacent. So let's even pivot to our teachers a little bit and making sure that they understand that they have power. And I wanted to also make sure today I say that in this time where most teachers are teaching in a very unique and different way under a lot of different stressors, that we see you and we appreciate you. So Pam, we have a question here. And the question is talking about the difference between culturally relevant teaching, I think, and multiculturalism. I want to just hit on a minute because I think I've seen you teach about this before. At what point do you step out and teach about, or at what point, how do you get the courage? I guess that's the question. How do you get the courage to teach specifically about a specific issue that concerns race? Like, or you did this dynamic lesson when Black Panther came out, and really dug deep into African history, everything from clothing and jewelry and language. But you took a really bold step there because that was a fictional movie, but you decided to make it culturally relevant with modern day things. So how you pivot from that to people talking about sometimes you get into a situation where people lump all races into the same category, and it's just more of a multicultural lesson.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time for both. So how do you know when it's the appropriate time for which?
There was that was a multi-layered question.
So many layers in it. Girl, I lost myself. It was so many layers in that.
I was trying to pick each layer apart.
Grab something, sis. Grab something.
So when I think about multiculturalism, I think about that standard melting pot that America is considered, where you have multiple people speaking languages that the other may not know, wearing clothes, garb that the other may not wear, having experiences, religion, food, anything, that the others may not necessarily get. In this country, we've got a standard, though. There's a standard that has become the thing that every other culture then is the other. So when I think of culturalism, I want to say, okay, yes, we have a standard. There is this new, not the British way, but the American way, which is very, I'll just say standard. But then you got other folks that came over on boats against their will. Some of them who were already here. Some of them came over on boats that were absolutely on board with, hey, let's just get over here and get it going. Recognizing that all of those cultures and languages converge into some of our classrooms, and seeing those individuals and making sure that, like I said before, they all have voice, that their stories are all represented. That's kind of what I think about multicultural, and whole majors are built around multiculturalism. So I'm not sure if I can really get it in a nutshell right now, but to differentiate that from culturally relevant teaching, it really centers on the teacher. You'll have a multicultural classroom, but then how do you make your lesson relevant to the children who are in front of you? That does require the boldness. That requires you to recognize, I may not know about this segment of my class. Now I have to go educate myself. So a lot of times we have to be honest and true and not lie to ourselves as adults and teachers and the adults in the room thinking that, yeah, we know everything. And, the kids don't have anything to bring, when, oh my goodness, I learn so much from my students all the time. And when I want to know more, I have to be bold enough to recognize that I have to go and do some work. And I'm not afraid of doing the work. I love learning so that I can then not just, I learn a fact and I'm gonna turn around and say the fact. I think that can be a little contentious sometimes. But I learn the fact and I connect it to my curriculum so that it's relevant. And I don't just watch one video or two videos or read one book. I continue to add layers onto my knowledge and make connections that maybe 10 years ago, when I was just starting this work, I've been teaching 25 years, but when I first started my career, I might not have been able to make those connections. But now I'm like, ooh, this puzzle is coming together a whole lot more. It's synthesizing a lot more. Culturally relevant teaching is making sure that whatever you see outside going on, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and all the angst that was pent up, be it whether you were a supporter or a questioner or I don't know why, all that ends up in your classroom. How are you going to allow conversations around that very sensitive topic you have to be brave enough to just say, hey, look, this is what's going on outside. Let's talk and make sure that you understand where that came from. It didn't just come up from 3 random events that happened, but a teacher who has a heart for multicultural learning understands there are layers to this thing. There is a long and storied history here. So I have characters from the history that mirrors literature that show up in the classroom. I got to deal with that. They have to deal with each other, because when they go to lunch, you know, that lunchtime conversation may not be so peaceful. That hallway slick comment may not be received so well. So do we bring the outside bigger culture, the macrocosm, into our smaller classrooms? Yeah, we do, but we have to do it with honesty and respect and openness to learn and deal with it, because it's not going away unless we do that. Because I think the reason why it's so pent up and it explodes so violently is because everybody's talking in their own silos. And we're not open and free and honest and just getting it out. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary.
So you answered it as multi-layered as I asked it. So thanks for that. I appreciate that right there. One of the things you said is you have to just get in there and teach it. Well, what if, Michael, my school district or my school or my principal is not down with this type of material being taught? I mean, they may not be able to say it outright, but it may be hinted. It may be just common knowledge. I may be the rebel. You know. So, what advice could you give to teachers to enter into that uncomfortable conversation, not with students and even parents, but with their own peers and with their superiors?
Well, one of the things I love asking myself:
how do you make a case for teaching this type of material in the classroom?
When I get to those situations myself, the main question I would ask is, what are we really doing here? Like, are we teaching or are we programming? Right? So when you begin to ask yourself that question, most of the time I've seen that you see that argument come from parents and administration. And I always try to tell teachers, try to find a way to tie it back to the standards that are being taught. And then if you can find a current event to marry that particular standard, some amazing things can happen. So I'll give you a good example. I teach 4th grade social studies. So I get to try to lay the foundation and toil the soil before they get to Mrs. Haskins. So we know about George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and we saw the protest and the angst and the anger that was going throughout the entire country, throughout the United States of America. And you also saw people saying, what is wrong with those individuals protesting? Why are they destroying things? The unique thing about that is, being a teacher, is that I can pair that conversation, that current event, up with the events that led to the American Revolutionary War. A lot of people don't know, but with the Stamp Act, you know, the colonists were mad at King George III because they kept getting taxed, right? So what ended up happening is that the colonists were here at the beginning that took over from Native Americans. They were taking fake tax collectors and building effigies and burning them in the street, breaking windows, throwing tea off of the ship, right? So that is a form of protesting as well. And what happens is, marrying that standard along with the current event allows that conversation to happen inside of the classroom. And if a person has a problem with that type of conversation happening inside of the classroom, then there is a deeper step that needs to be taken there. Because in reality,
Michael, you did not just say folks were breaking windows when they were protesting the tea. Now, I ain't never heard that. My teacher did not do that. They just went peacefully to the ship and they picked up the items and they threw them off the side, and then they went back home.
I guess, let me get you right. Like that,
windows, Michael.
Yeah. So with the Stamp Act, they were breaking windows. People that are watching, they'll look up effigy. Okay, they took tax collectors, stuffed them with hay, and burnt them in the street to protest against the taxes. With the Boston Tea Party, they did board the ship and they did dress up as Native Americans and they did throw the tea over to attack capitalism that was happening in regards to with King George III in England. So what I want teachers to understand is you are going to get some kickback. Why? Because the American education system has oftentimes reinforced the bigotry, the misogynistic attitudes, and the racism that exist inside of our society. So when you begin to attack the very thing that our society is built upon, you have to expect the kickback. The thing that keeps me going and gives me passion is this. My students are not going to always be with me. They are going to eventually leave Mr. Bonner's classroom. Can I educate them in a way that they can understand the different nuances in society, the biases that may take place, understand the political language, understand how media can be used to sway us, whether it's propaganda or dealing with implicit bias? Can they understand those things? And if they can, then my job is done. And that is why I rest as a teacher. I understand that there's going to be kickback, but am I really teaching just to have high test scores, or am I teaching to help a child make a generational difference in the lives of others? That's
teaching to empower. Teaching to empower. You are arming them with skill and knowledge. That's awesome.
See, I mean, and it seems so simple, right? You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. It's not that deep. You know, you want the students to end up being good human beings. That's it. I mean, the bar is not even that high. Just be good. Be good to yourself. Be good to others. You know, be good to the world. Then we get into go out and make a difference and go out and be the change. We're not even there yet. We're just at the point of saying, just everybody just be good to one another. And then that's what you're teaching your classroom. Oh, you brought it, Michael. You saw me snapping, I was snapping.
You see who my mentor is, right? You see who my mentor is.
I see her there. Well, here you mentioned, just for our teachers that are in the room, you mentioned teaching media bias. Just then, as a part of your answer, I want to make sure that teachers know that in our Array 101 Learning Companion for when they see us, if you go to the field study lesson, if you go to the website, if our moderators can make sure they drop that in the chat, you go to the field study lesson on the right-hand side of that lesson, and you will find this incredible lesson written by our friends at XQ and X in a Box. And they have written a lesson that is a statistics activity wrapped in a media bias lesson. And in that particular lesson, it's a very challenging lesson. We take the New York City arrest database and we ask students to learn how to analyze data. They learn how to use the database, and they take data sets out, the same data sets, and they have to write. They have 1 hour to create a news broadcast. They have to do 2 stories, one that paints the young men in a positive light and a story using the same data that paints the young men in a negative light. Same data points, same young men, same background story, same everything. But you're going to use data to go in 2 very different ways and point out that media bias. So statistics activity wrapped up in a media bias lesson that then we pivot after that and start to show you a little workforce development fun. And we identify all of the different careers that you could have if that lesson was interesting to you. If this lesson is interesting to you, then check out being a television producer, a writer, a statistician, you know, an accountant. Like we give you all of these different things that you could, an attorney, things that you might want to pursue if you're a student, if that lesson was of interest to you. The field study lesson, I think, in Selma also does something similar when talking about media bias, because it gets into gerrymandering and it gets into the efficiency gap, and it's another math lesson. So I really want our teachers to make sure that they explore these learning companions. We also have all of the backup information, all of the links. We share that in a downloadable way, and you can take that out and use that and just pick out little pieces. It'll take you forever to get through the When They See Us guide. Because of my friends at RCA, it's a little faster with the Selma one, but there is there is some interesting stuff happen. All right, so I'm going to look quickly over here, you had someone, Michael, that said, thank you for saying this. It is so important for teachers to be vulnerable and understand we all have so much to learn. We need to continue to ask questions and be comfortable in being uncomfortable. We cannot step in front of students believing we know it all. I think that was on you too, Pam. I mean, seriously.
I want to tell Aaron thank you, because to be honest, Aaron, I'm uncomfortable every day of my life in certain areas where I have to go into as a successful Black man, right? But I feel like it's my obligation to make sure that we are giving our students the truth. And that's the unique thing about CRT, or, culturally responsive, culturally relevant teaching, is that we're always constantly evolving. It's not going to just stop you posting a picture or black square on social media for a protest. It's not going to just stop by, reading a book. It's going to be a continual life process as we continue to evolve. I see the question right there, Tammy. So do you want me to try to go for it?
Yeah, I want you to go for it. So this is about teaching. I think we have a friend who might be in the UK. who is asking about how they can teach about the events that have been happening in the United States in a way that is relevant to their students over there.
Okay, so the first thing I would do, and I'll throw it to Haskins after. So for me, what I would do is simply look at data. It's funny how it's almost like we are objective towards data. If it doesn't really apply to us, we can look at climate change. We can look at data when it's time to order something from something good to eat as far as the menu and how much it's going to cost. But when we say that there is an outlier happening in a specific area with a group of people, that's letting us know as an indicator based on statistics, something is going on there. So for my students, if you want to introduce it to them, the best way to introduce it to them is first to make sure that you have a safe community within your classroom, that everybody understands that we respect and value each other, even if we choose to disagree with each other. Then you can be able to roll in different issues from all across the world to make sure that you can make it relevant for them as they go out to their own communities and to their own societies. So I would first say the best way to introduce it is simply say, like I do with my fourth graders, hey, y'all, I have noticed there's an outlier happening. There's something going on in this particular area or something happening with specific people. Maybe we should look into this. This is what's going on. You lay it out. And in my classroom, my students will never know if Mr. Bonner is a Democratic or Republican. What they will do or will be able to see is getting both sides in regards to the arguments and then allowing them to discuss it and see where their viewpoints are. And then in the end, we go look for the facts. We go look for what is true, what is happening, so we won't be swayed by media. That is sort of my thought process behind it. Make sure there's a safe community first, introduce it as far as being world leaders and looking at different communities and countries, and then try to get down to the facts and things.
One of the things I loved, Pam, pivoting off of what Michael just said, one of the things I loved in your voting lesson, Pam's lesson and Selma, you guys, is I voted. It's the first lesson in the Learning Companion. You didn't take any sides, right? A lot of times people feel like if you're teaching about social justice movements or equity or inclusion, then you kind of pivot to a side. And one of the things we all made sure we did with this was we stayed neutral and we just gave facts, Michael, right? So in yours, you straight came with facts. Like you were like, here are the facts. And you laid out a case for why voting, the history of voting, and then the why it was essential then when the Voting Rights Act was signed and why it's essential now. So can you just break that down a little bit, how you teach in a very neutral way with facts and you're still able to be powerful in your classroom and in your message?
Okay. Do you mind if I answer that question within the context of the one that okay. So that's exactly what I was going to say. I would, in the UK or wherever it is that you are, and you don't have a multicultural classroom, meaning you don't have someone who's going to take a side versus the other side, strip race away from it and just go from the facts. Because think about it. What happened? A man's life was taken by another man because the air was cut off for 8 minutes. Now, those facts within themselves are like, wait a minute, how do you treat another human being like that? Breonna Taylor was in her home. There was an invasion by the authorities, and they were looking for something, didn't find it, but ended up shooting her. She dies. Even without race, those facts indicate there's another layer going on. So when you get the kids really interested in, well, wait a minute, how did this happen and no one went to jail? There was no there was no punishment, no consequence for that. There's going to be a conversation that stirs within the hearts of those kids at that point. Then you can layer race on. Then you can say, well, one side was, of a class of people in the United States that have been disenfranchised by the other. So now, how do we deal with this? So at that point, you've taken the sides away when you just present the case. And so I want to make sure that whatever it is that I present to my students, that they understand what happened, what were the things that occurred. Now, whether or not you agree with it, whether or not you're on one side or the other, that's secondary. But once you understand the facts, usually one side kind of wins over the other one because it's like, well, the big question comes about.
Right. Uh-oh, I think Pam was frozen for just a second. But we all, okay, go ahead. Now you're
No,
mobile
and
again.
the big question comes, why? Why would that happen? Why is that acceptable? Why is that okay? Why did no consequences come? What's the difference between one person committing a crime and another person committing a crime? Wouldn't there be a consequence for this other person? So why? And that's when you get into the conversation. That's when it really takes off at that point, because the answer to the question why, that's the rub.
Well, in that lesson, when you're answering why, I love how you poised everything in your video that you shot. But we also talk in Selma, for our teachers who have not seen this, we talk about equity and equality versus equity, and those outcomes in that lesson. And we also talk about instances that actually happen in the history of voting rights in America, that, things that were done to just certain people, those are the facts, to keep them or just deter them from voting, even if they had the right to vote, and what the repercussions are of that, what the legacy of that is to this day. And so I think it's really important that the facts do matter, because the facts actually inform where we're sitting right now, this year, 2020. And it helps, I think, students to understand that they're not the first to experience something, and they won't be the last. And what they do today, I think you say in your lesson, Pam, has direct implications on what happens in their children's future.
In both directions. Their grandparents dealt with it, and their children will deal with it if we don't handle it now. I lost my mom 4 years ago, and she was a meticulous file keeper. I opened a file that had no less than 10 receipts for poll taxes. Now, had I not been informed of what they were, I probably would have tossed that. But I sat there staring at these poll tax receipts. It was only a couple of bucks, but back then, for folks in the South, that was a lot of money. And they were dated in the 1940s. So I'm sitting here like, I'm holding history in my hand. I'm holding something that makes what I just talked about so real. And it was in the file with the wills and the life insurance policies. It was that important.
It was that important. It was that important to her. And she held on to it all these years. She wanted to make sure, if y'all try to come back and say my vote didn't count,
I got a receipt.
20 years later, I have a receipt.
I got it. That's right.
That was Mississippi, right?
Yes.
Yeah. God bless her. And she was an educator as well?
She was an educator. So was my dad. Yeah. Both of them.
Shout out to our educators and the legacies of our educators. Michael, you had something you wanted to share with us, because when you talk about fairness and making sure you just talk about facts.
Yeah. And Pam did a really good job of hitting on it, and it explains why she's such a great teacher. Her parents were outstanding as well, right? But what I would like to say is, when you're trying to make sure you remove the race and things from a particular conversation, there's a website that I use that was given to me by Lecture Thompson, who is our school counselor, outstanding individual. Website. It's called allsides.org. Now, the reason why I love using this website is because it actually categorizes news articles based upon if it's far left, Democratic, far right, Republican, or if it's moderate in the center. What happens in my classroom is that we get to look at each title of the article, and then we can see, whoa, that's way more aggressive than this side. Okay, let's really find the truth. It becomes almost like a mystery. They're trying to find the facts and what's really going on behind all the hidden language. So allsides.org is a really good website to use.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. Allsides.org, and it is our hosts from Google, I think Jessica or Kelly, they've dropped it into the chat so that you guys can have it for later. And we have one more question, and then we're going to start to wrap things up. Kat asked a really great question. How are you creating the safe classroom space while teaching online for these important, relevant, uneasy lessons? How are you creating a safe classroom space? Because I said this in the green room before we came on. When we're talking about social injustice, when we're talking about civil rights, I'm comfortable now. I'm comfortable having these conversations. But most of our lives, I spent uncomfortable in classrooms. It was kind of like if you talked about the founding of America, I kind of felt like I fit in with everybody else. But then when you talked about slavery, everybody was just looking at me, right? So, or the one other kid sitting over there, David. So, it was like the two of us represented all of enslavement for all 400 years of America's history.
Yep.
So I know what it feels like to be the uneasy kid in the classroom, but let's flip it. How do we make sure that we're creating a safe space so people who don't want to have these conversations, or people who feel like they are being blamed for the atrocities that were committed against people in the country, no matter what the subject matter is, the good versus evil, right? So the person who feels like they're the perpetuator of the situation, how do you make those kids feel like, they're not the safe? How do you make them feel safe? And that they're not holding the sins of other people on their shoulders? Either one of you can take it.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. In my classroom, I found it easier. I'll just be honest. I found it much easier when I could close my door and cozy up with the kids. We just kind of sit on the floor and be real calm and relaxed. Take that I'm standing here as the expert and you're the ones that are here. We just kind of get cozy and comfortable. The online environment is different. And, you got, mom, dad, grandma, auntie, all the little sisters and brothers and all this stuff listening to class. It's like multiple courses going on at the same time. So how do your voice break through a home environment where those things are not talked about? That is an excellent question. And I wish I had an easy answer. And I think that for me, what's made it easier is because people know I do this work. They know that when they get to 8th grade, it's going down. We're going to have this conversation. We're going to talk about it. I think that the alumni, the kids who've left, kind of lead them to understand. Now, when you get to Miss Haskins' class, this is kind of the stuff that y'all are going to be talking about. These are the topics, because they hear when I'm talking to the current 8th graders, the others would come by and hear the conversations at the lockers. So in my experience, it's me and another couple of teachers in the building, 8th grade, Miss Susan Barnes, Dr. Jones. We all kind of like have that reputation of being the ones that's going to break it down to you.
Right.
So they already know. They've been forewarned. Now I'm wondering about, like, Mr. Bonner, I know you're doing that work for the younger kids in our building, and we are definitely vertically teaming and making sure that the curriculum will grow as the students matriculate through the school. So I think it'll happen that way. But please understand that everyone in our building, we're on the same page. We're all keenly aware of the importance of this work. So even if Michael and I aren't talking about it, there are other teachers who are sprinkling it, be they white or black, whoever it is, sprinkling it into their science lesson, into their math lesson. So it's a common thread. It's a common conversation that occurs throughout our school. And I'll say that Mr. Clark comes on our Zooms every Tuesday and has a school-wide lesson. And our school-wide lesson talks about whatever's going on in the news, and so it's just kind of a part of our culture. In the school itself, we have taken a very aggressive approach to this topic. And I tell you, it's been one that has been so eye-opening for me to see kind of my colleagues be a little uncomfortable with it, but then be like, okay, all right, we're cool, y'all. We still okay? Yes, it's fine. Let's just talk about it. We're just having a conversation that usually does not happen amongst mixed race colleagues, but we got to, especially if you're going to be standing in front of my black and brown children delivering lessons. I need you to understand these things. Yeah. So we've broken the mold, I believe, in our building around this conversation. So it's comfortable for us to have them online because those parents know where their kids are going to school.
So changing the entire culture of you have to almost have a holistic approach when you're talking about doing some of this. You can start in your classroom. I think I'm hearing you, but it helps even more if everybody's on the same page.
Yes.
That being good is the good and right thing to do, right? So I'm going to end it with that. And I just want to say thank you to Pam and Michael for joining us. Shout out to my girls, Kelly and Jessica from Google, who gave us this platform, who are chatting with us behind the scenes and in the green room, doing everything behind the scenes. And then I wanted to say a special thank you to Regina Miller, who's the executive director of Array Alliance, our nonprofit under which this all sits, and is how we are able to make it free for you. And also to our president, Tulane Jones, whose vision first started developing these lesson plans, and she passed the baton to me earlier this year. And this is the manifestation of her work plus my work. And I just, all of our comrades at Array, thank you for your support on this. To our teachers, finally, we see you. We know this is a rough year, and we love you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep challenging people to be good people because it's the right thing to do. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate you. Oh, I didn't say Miss Bogan. Miss Bogan is signing. If I could sign and say thank you, I would. Just give me a thank you, Miss Bogan. Thank you, Miss Bogan.
Thank you.